What is the definition of success for you, and does it change over time?
Yeah, I'll be very commercial in that answer. Just about enough money to keep whatever pampering of health that I need and my family needs and my friends need, and as many parties that I can throw across the globe, right? So for me, that if I can do these two things, that I can go for a swim wherever I want. If I can go and throw a party in whatever ABC country for my friends, if I'm able to do these two, three things, mental and physical health plus my parties, I'm happy. So for me, 30 to 100 CR in India is a happy range. Beyond 100 CR, maybe some problems start coming in. I had these problems. I had literally influenced people coming outside my house and asking for money, and it became tough for me also. That putting that aside, but I think 30 to 100 CR, if you ask looking for a figure, 30 to 100 CR. When I started, I tell you, my I thought 1 CR in my account, I'll get 1 lakh of my interest every month. I'm going to live my life happily ever after. One became five, five became 30, 30 became 100, whatever. So that's how it changed. But I think 30 to 100 is the happy range. After that, it's just about being a little greedy.
Right. So picking up from that, what do you think is the, because I know it could be a typical question, but what essentially is the difference between salary and wealth, and how can a salaried employee go on to creating wealth? Is it possible, or do you necessarily need to be an entrepreneur who has equity to be wealthy?
So I'll tell you, me being so open, when I was 27 and when I was moving from my company to become an entrepreneur, I went to my boss and actually said, "Sir, don't mind, you might two levels up. How much worth of assets do you have?" So he said, "Hey, you know what? In total, I have 14 crores of assets, and this is gonna. I still have some loans on these things." So then I realized that, hey, you know what? This guy is about 45, and with all the salaries and all the levels that he's still at 14 CR. So I, in my mind, said, hey, this is not the place for me then. So in a salary environment, you can definitely be very well off, especially if you have things like DINGs, double income, no case, or even if you have case. Today there's a new word called drinks, double roaring income, no case. So you have I have my friends who are at really senior levels who are roaring with income, but until and unless you have equity, the wealth quotient doesn't change. The wealth equity is like something which can change tomorrow morning to a very drastic level, right? So equity means the shares that you have in a company where you work for yourself or someone else. So if you're in a job without equity, I'm not the guy you need to call up. If you're a company, a person who's looking to get equity in the company and how to get it, that is the place that I can kind of help and say, hey, do not work there if they're not giving you offering you equity. Yeah.
Right. Now, money, we talked about money on a personal front. Now, let's talk about money while being an entrepreneur, running a company. So, when you started out, I think the Indian startup ecosystem was not as developed. So, funding was there, but it was not as much as it's presently there. So, Series A is very common in India, at least right now. So, there are two approaches usually. And I heard someone from Sequoia Capital, I think their partner said that the early on you share, like if you sell a big chunk of your company early on, you're losing out on a lot of money. And whereas other people feel that funding tends to give you a lot of flexibility. You've been on both sides of the spectrum. So you started at IHO with zero funds, but with Goals101 you're more funded. So what ideally should be an approach for any young entrepreneur? Should we focus on getting funding, or funding is something that will just come along? How do you see funding in a startup?
The funding is quite a fad. Let me tell you that straight away. The first business that you do should generate cash for sure. If you think of I'm just talking again. Obviously, there will be exceptions, and people hear of those exceptions. Everybody starts dreaming for those similar stars, but a lot of people burn to reach to those stars, right? So I'm just saying. I've talked on forums, including Sequoia, Lightspeed, on the same forum as me on TIE. I don't know if you know TIE. So TIE is the Indus entrepreneur. That's an entrepreneurial
Yeah.
thing. So I was twice the global winner of the TIE awards, whatever they call it, whatever. So on those forums, a lot of people were asking questions to all the venture, how do I raise funds and everything. So I was only bootstrapped company. So my first two companies are bootstrapped. First company did close to about $100 million of top lines, about $25 million of bottom line, without a single iota of funding. The second company again was extremely doing. It was profitable. In the third year, it got acquired by Aetna, which is a Fortune 49 company, and it was again in multi-million dollar deal. So both the companies, without a single iota of funding, I was able to have good exits. The reason why I wanted to do this third one with funding was that The scale that I'm looking at is a lot more different. I'm looking at global scale. I'm looking at faster growth. And now I don't need to really beg for terms with VCs, right? Earlier, if I was doing it for the first time, they will put, let's say, $5 million, and they'll ask for 50% of the company. I today when I talk to VC, it's equal respect for terms and understanding and what's going to come out, right? So so today I understand that, and that's where I chose to take funding. Otherwise, if still I had a choice, I would not have done that. Yeah, yeah.
And while we're on the money talk, I know this is something which might be slightly off in such a kind of a conversation, but I think entrepreneurs are like the flag bearers of capitalism. So how would you, as an entrepreneur, solve poverty, or how would you address
Solve for.
poverty? How would
Oh,
you? And I know this is slightly off for a conversation like this,
absolutely. So
but
there are
how would you?
different. So capitalism does solve for poverty, by the way. So I'll tell you how. So for example, if you bring money in the country, it's not that I'm going to die with the money, right? It's there will be a time where I'll be spending it, and if I spend it on a consumer good, I spend it what it does slow down into the economy. There are two ways to solve the economy. As I told you, I go and solve for three people sitting on the street right now, or I bring wealth into the country from different modes, and I solve for that in multiple other ways of ensuring that people's businesses further work. Because if I become rich, my teams become rich, consumerism increases, and that's how jobs happen. So it's all about the belief on how you want to influence that. So Mukesh Ambani, for example, if he's rich, he's employing so many people, and further people are getting employed, and that's how India is progressing. So somebody may say, hey, is it somebody alone getting a lot of money? Maybe yes, maybe beyond a certain amount, yes. But if he's still trying to pass it on, or whoever is, I think that's a better way of solving for the economy than just being socialist or any other form of solving for it. Where when you get lazy and you get slow in life, like I would tomorrow down the line, I would do it in that way also. I have time for going and talking and putting hands on people's shoulders and saying, "Hey, do not cry, I'm around." So there are different ways to do it, and I think the capitalist way is the most practically, economically accepted way of doing it. Yeah.
So I think coming back to education now, you went to DPS Archipuram, you went to Chandigarh, and you went to MDI, and then you also went to HPS, and now you're studying at
Berkeley.
Cal. So you're studying at Berkeley.
Yeah, that's right.
Contrast the educational experience at both these places.
Everything has its own goods and bads, by the way. So for example, you learn how to work hard in the Indian education ecosystem, and that's very critical down the line, because you're able to toil, you're able to put that extra hours when required, you're able to take the stress. So those are the advantages of the Indian education system. Engineering obviously puts a little more analytical approach to your approach to anything. For example, you become a lot more shrewd cutting maybe, and that's what you start. Everything is a number, close to that at least. That's what they had said, that engineers will talk numbers rather than talk words. So that's the advantage of doing engineering broadly. Otherwise, anything else that I did over there is nothing that I remember of. And then in an MBA in India is again extremely cutting edge. People are really trying to stamp on your feet to reach to the next one. So everybody has their own strategy. Somebody do it with projects with good teams. Somebody will try and do it with good speaking with their teachers, and somebody will do it with smart talking. So those are things that you learn. But fundamentally, I think the approach that I saw at HBS, the quality of the teachers, obviously, it's very different. The quality of teachers is quite different. The campus, the way they built it, the experience that they gave, the planning that they do around it. Obviously, superlative is a lot more old also. America knows how to brand itself. The fees are high because of the way they brand. So they built an ecosystem which is developing on its own positively. So they increase the fees, they get the right students, and the right student means, let's say 50% of the class can definitely have kids who are quite influential also. Because for example, you are able to do this podcast, but there could be a kid sitting in, I'm saying, Gujarat somewhere or some Mehsana, who's not able to do it, right? So probability of his admission versus your admission is quite different. So obviously the right persons keep going there. So as I told you, it's a very positive vertex in the upward direction that's been getting built over there, and that's difficult to break. So teachers are there, they are on the boards of best companies. They have seen the business case that they write is what they've seen themselves, and they're talking about it. There is no right and wrong over there. The good part about what HBS education or US education is there's no answer to a case study. So you could be totally saying something else to solve something as a problem. They will not go and say, hey, you know what, Srishti, you were quite wrong in this one. India has a binary approach, like, hey, this is right and this is wrong. Over there, nothing is wrong. So that's, I think, creativity, marketing, and structured is something that is quite different from in the US compared to or the international education compared to the Indian education. So yeah, so I think that's why the risk taking capabilities, the breadth of thought process is a lot more over there.
So I think since now the startup ecosystem in India is brimming, what do you think is still lacking? Since you've been in, so America can be said as the epicenter of the entire startup because it had a lot of successful startups one after the other. Where do you think the Indian startup ecosystem is at present, and where is it heading? Where should it head ideally, and what's lacking or what's missing?
So if I had a dream, a lot of enterprise companies have gone international. That hey, you know what? For example, Infosys is an international enterprise company, is in like the solving software. There will be a lot of interesting companies that are getting big, but there's no consumer company like you have a Facebook over there, you have a Alibaba or whatever who's gone from India internationally. So I'm just waiting for somebody to have that vision of saying like, hey, you know what? A billion people use this, and that's why the world should use it. It's right now it's the other way around. That is, WhatsApp is used in the US, then it has to be used. So I'm still waiting for someone to have the guts to build a consumer business for the world. So rather than just maybe doing it for India. So that's what I think is missing. Otherwise, I think the most disruptive ideas and thought process are here. Some are maybe a replica of what's happening internationally, but that's absolutely okay. If something is good, copy it shamelessly is absolutely fine. So I think creativity as well as global consumer business coming out of India is what I would have probably added to. Yeah. I think one company which is trying to do something on this is Ola, where they try to build businesses in Australia, which is decently consumer business, and in some other countries. So I think that was one. Oyo is halfway there. So I think these companies have really made a serious attempt to do it. So, and we should encourage them rather than putting us down. So the memes and the issues that we make out of these entrepreneurs is unfair. You will not see somebody making that of a Mark Zuckerberg, and you won't see it all across the world. But it's happening for the Indian entrepreneur, which is that's the Indian crab mentality. The Indians keep pulling the other crab before it reaches the top of the world. Right?
Right. So I tend to feel the biggest strength that you have as a person and also as an entrepreneur is your conviction of thought, of the way you conduct yourself, of your business, and that where do you find that conviction from? Because entrepreneurship can be romanticized. However, it's really hard to be an entrepreneur, and when you go back home, it's a hard toil, and you tend to get low as well sometimes. Where do you get that conviction from? Where you believe in that whatever you're doing, you have your blinkers on, and you blend your passion and purpose with a good amount of conviction. Where do you get it from?
Uh, Conviction that comes from success, frankly, a little bit of success. Otherwise, if you just next day you morning you start and you start believing that I'm going to change the world, it's nice to believe that. It's very nice to believe that. But I think some success. So I think the success has to be step by step. It can't be if you start jumping, thinking of the world, for example, if tomorrow morning I'm just saying if the entire world thinks I want to get into Stanford, and if that's the dream, that's good to have. But if it's not, that doesn't happen. So the first thing you should be happy is that hey, you know what, I did a very successful podcast in which hey, I got 1,000 people to view it. I'm just saying. So once you do that, you'll say, hey, I had a target which I did. I think I can do next something better. So step by step increases your conviction. So today, for example, in business, for example, let's say 10 parameters or variables is what you need to handle. I kind of have now, because I've handled 8 well, I have complete conviction on those 8. There will be 2 parameters which I should not don't have conviction because I've not personally shown success. I'm still looking at learning a lot more on technology, on data science. So this is something that I haven't cracked myself. So I will not have complete conviction on myself. So that's why I will bring support on that. But conviction, I think, comes from success. And success should be drawn down to levels like, hey, you know what, everything is not about straight away jumping to the Mount Everest. So you can go to Kilimanjaro, take that, get some conviction on yourself, and then go ahead and do other peaks. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. So, one tradition that we have on our podcast with school kids is that we always ask our speakers to contrast the way they were brought up and now, if they have children, how are they bringing them up? You were a first generation entrepreneur. Your father was a government officer. So, how was your childhood life? How was your upbringing? What were the seeds of thought that were planted in your head? And now, how are you changing that? And what part of it are you still using while you're bringing your children up?
I think I was a tough kid because I was very with the geeky kids who were very irritating. I think I was that kind. Parents will say, "Let's go for a marriage." I'll say, "No, I want to stay at home." I want to study. Typical those kind of the ones with specs, right? And specs and always sitting below the table. That what if somebody would tell me that hey, there are 5 relatives who have come and say cousins want to say hi to you. I would hide below a table. I'll go in the car and studying. So I think I was a very must be a tough kid to manage that way, a boring kid to manage that way. So the only thing I am different with is I try and make it fun, and everything is, let's say, laugh it out. Everything will happen and encourage on the right parameters. That's it. Otherwise, nothing to blame anyone. Both every way is right. My dad taught me how to be extremely professional, hardworking, and take everything head on. So no qualms like, hey, I don't want to go and say, what, I had a tough life and this thing, what, I cracked it. I didn't study under the street light top. I did study in the car because of my own reason, because I said there are too many people in the house. And so that was my reason. And today I try and be fun. I make them study in the car, my kids, but only for the reasons of letting them enjoy it rather than anything else. That's my thing. So the only thing I've changed is to make them have a lot more fun in whatever they do, laughter and fun.
As a businessman, as a CEO, as a leader of your company, how much does company culture, how important company culture is? How do you see that? How do you strike a balance between being a leader and an entrepreneur? And where does, because I read a lot of articles in Harvard Business Review which says, EQ is a must in all entrepreneurs. So, and you tend to disagree with it slightly. So how do you maintain the company culture? How do you balance between being a leader and an entrepreneur?
So the EQ doesn't come when things are bad, by the way. So it's not that, hey, you know what, today I can't come to office because I'm unwell, and somebody I call up the person and say, hey, you know what, why are you unwell today? EQ comes in the good times also, and I think that gets missed. So I would like have a lot of fun with all the youngsters. I'll make them enjoy that, make them understand the values of being integrated, high on integrity. I also learned it the tough way. I'll actually give you a real life example. After my second acquisition of the company, they called me to one of the European countries for some training. Okay. And they said, so how do you manage in India? So I said, hey, you know what? In India also we're decently high on integrity. And my global president said, what do you mean by decently? You have to be 100% high on integrity, perfect on integrity. So for example, those things are something that I didn't understand as culture aspects at all. I'm just saying, so today I'm trying to teach them these things, discipline and aspects. So I'm good with my EQ on the good times. On the bad times, my EQ is practical. So it is, hey, you know what? If this person may probably need a loan, I will not go and say, you know what, ABC, I'm calling you. I showed, what company can offer you a loan. I'm with you on this time. They should know that this is going to quietly happen. So the EQ definition by putting a hand on the shoulder is one way, as I told you earlier. And the other definition of EQ is to be practically available, have the monies, have the resources to do it right for your teams. But yes, culture, a fun culture, a bonded culture, no one can beat it. So in Harvard Business School, one of the top 3 things that I learned was the fundamental of every company is the people and the culture you build around it. And that's a fact. There's no questions about it. If you got 6 or 10 right people in your team to begin with, and they can jump off the 6th floor along with you, then those are the guys, then you have a successful company for sure. In that direction or some direction, but successful for sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, what's the best part about being an entrepreneur, and then what's the worst part about being an entrepreneur?
Worst, I'm still to find the worst part, because thankfully success has happened. Maybe stress for some people. I always say that, what, my left side, which is the heart, has almost become of steel or stone. So for me, stress doesn't just passes through on the side and goes off. So I think the best parts are everything. It has space, independence, wealth, your decision making, your time, everything on earth. Obviously, I always encourage that people should get some experience before they become entrepreneurs, so that how does good HR work, how does big companies think, how the structures work, process work, because otherwise you have to experiment all of that at a very expensive cost, and that cost should be at the cost of someone else. The cons of entrepreneurship can only be stress for some people, and those people who are just looking at straight big wins that, hey, I want funding. I think those people will probably, a lot of those may stagger, or maybe some of them can be getting a little challenged by that thought of racing for that funding. Yeah, that's
What,
it.
because I think it's a podcast with school kids. What's the essence to being an entrepreneur? How should a person is growing up, probably say high school, how should they be able to realize? Because you had that realization that entrepreneurship is the thing for me. What's the essence to being an entrepreneur? What does it mean to be an entrepreneur presently?
Mhm. Okay, the couple of things, maybe in the early ages, you can kind of see that you have skills to talk to people. Right? As I said, at that young age, if you think you're not too shy, and it's not that way. By the way, Mark Zuckerberg, for example, was one of the poorest managers. I'm
Yeah.
saying poorest doctors. It's not that obviously there are exceptions, but I think, for example, if you have the skill to maybe network and talk to people, that's a good sign. Second, if you're super intelligent in certain aspect, for example, you know what, I know how to do this very well. So I think these two would be early traits of finding out whether you have things in you. And third could be probably you're generally good at everything. Some people are like the head girls or the prefects, almost very good at everything, right? So if you're good at everything, then you're good at this also. So yeah, so maybe these three things. A person like me at school, if you would have seen, you would have seen this guy would be the worst possible entrepreneur. So if I can from a bottom of a desk or is hiding in a car can become one, I'm sure anyone can.
So my last and final question is going to be, what does success mean to you? What did because you made an Excel sheet at 19 and then again
Uh,
later in life. What does success mean to you? What did it mean to you when you started out? What does it mean to you right now? Is it achievement, significance, or legacy? What is the definition of success for you, and does it change over time?
No, I'll be very commercial in that answer. Just about enough money to keep whatever pampering of health that I need and my family needs and my friends need, and as many parties that I can throw across the globe, right? So for me, that if I can do these two things, that I can go for a swim wherever I want. If I go and throw a party in whatever ABC country for my friends, if I'm able to do these two, three things, mental and physical health plus my parties, I'm happy. So for me, the success is defined as just not by my watch or my car or whatever. So that's not what that those are initial days which I want to just do a few tick marks for my dad, which I did. And after that, I never went for a flashy car earlier, but I'm just saying now it's more of comfort. Otherwise, no. Yeah. So for me, the success is being happy with all these things. Yeah, health and mental health and physical health and international parties or and local parties.
So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you manifested your success before you even achieved it. So
True.
that's something I learned while I was, sort of stalking you. And I went down and I said, you know what, I'm going to maintain an Excel sheet where I'm going to write all the things that I eventually want to do in life. So thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure and delight to have you. And if there's anything you'd like to say now, so open floor.
No, I'm very, very, very
You
impressed. The reason I asked my teams, I'm not going on any podcast or anything from the biggest teams anywhere. I'm not about whatever. Even if there's an award, I ask someone else to go and apply for it. So the reason, the way you did it and the way the approach was, that encouraged me. And I hope you do well. And I'm sure you will, as well as all the kids who watch this.